faster, lighter, better than Windows 7. That's what this is all about. Windows 10 can be a bit of a clunky, big mess at times. And I've made plenty of optimization guides and how to install and this and that. This video takes everything. I'm talking custom ISOs, Windows AME, debloat scripts, all of them, combines them all into one video, and that's this video. Check timestamps down below. I've marked up everything. You don't necessarily need to do everything in this video. However, I wanted to go ahead and do everything so we can take this to the extreme. So with that said, let's get on the desktop and get into this. Now, in true fashion, I have created an entire article, which I'll expand on. I called it the Windows 10 Optimization Guide, and it's into 3 parts: the custom ISO part, installing Windows 10 and removing components, and then optimizing the settings. So we're going to start with custom ISO. The easiest method for a custom ISO, and if you're not familiar, this is the install media to install Windows 10, is NT Lite. It's $30. I'd put a link here, but you don't need to click the link. It's not an affiliate or anything like that. It's just a easy software to customize Windows 10. However, I really don't think that's applicable for probably most people watching the video, because you're going to just want a clean Windows to use for years on end. So the second method, is which I actually made a video about, was MSMG Toolkit. It's this right here. Just click on this. This video kind of shows you how to utilize this script. It'll show you how to actually create the entire ISO, and it breaks it down from this main menu, shows everything in the toolkit to make a custom ISO. About a 10-minute video watch if you want to take this method. However, I love giving you options when it comes to these types of things. And if we go back to the guide, you'll notice the third option, which is the official Microsoft method. You don't hear about it too much, and you probably don't see too many YouTube videos because it is a pain. I only recommend it for advanced users. However, I wanted to leave some links for those that want to go ahead and download the ADK or utilize Windows deployment services. Now, there was one video on YouTube which I thought was very good, just released by Craft Computing. Excellent guy, very knowledgeable. I watched this entire 30-minute video, and he did a dang good job of actually covering WDS and doing sysprep and those types of things. I will say most users are going to hate this, and honestly, I have PTSD just from doing it in business that I never want to make a video. I never even want to touch it again. That's how much I hate it. But it's an option for those that want to do it. So we'll create the ISO first using that, and I'm just going to throw it on Ventoy. Now, Ventoy, this is where it's kind of like a whole bunch of videos in one. Ventoy is a multi-boot solution to where you can just take a bunch of ISOs and drop them in here. There's a couple ISOs we're going to do. Well, obviously the custom Windows one, which pick your method that I just showcased. And then we also need to download Linux. And for Linux, I recommend Linux Mint. It's probably the most familiar to folks. So if we go Linux Mint, download, just grab the standard cinnamon flavor of Linux Mint right here and go for it. If you're in the US, I find GigaNet has probably some of the highest transfer speeds, or you could just torrent it directly. Either way, grab the Linux Mint ISO and also put it on Ventoy. You'll see I have it right here under Ventoy. I have a whole bunch of ISOs on my Ventoy, so we can easily install this one. I've already got the Windows 10 Lite, and we also have Linux Mint 20 Cinnamon Edition. So this is part one. Let's go ahead and install Windows in under 5 minutes utilizing this method. I'm going to go ahead and reboot the PC and start the install of Windows. All right, if we hit F2 or delete at startup, usually you get into your BIOS. From BIOS, I usually just go into your settings, save and exit, and usually you have a boot override. You could also change your boot around depending on what you're doing here. We're just going to go right into our USB that's plugged into the computer with Ventoy on it. We'll click enter and Ventoy. Now we just select our Windows Lite, that ISO we've created, and this should boot into a startup. Now let's go ahead and start the timer here, as this should only take about 5 minutes to install. I'll say I do not have product key. Since I've already activated Windows on this, it should already activate on startup. I will say during this setup, make sure that you go ahead and disconnect from the internet. We'll go ahead, delete all of our partitions here. Be careful not to delete any partitions on, say, a games drive like this 3 terabyte drive. We'll leave that intact. We have drive 0 unallocated. Next. Now, some people use the front ports on this. Don't do that. Go ahead, reach behind your computer, even if it's in a nook or cranny, plug it into a legit back port, preferably USB 3, using a USB 3 drive. This will take no time at all. As you see, it is just flying through this install process. We're about 2 minutes in right now, and we're almost done. I think this is actually going to probably take closer to about 3 minutes for the installation. And that's how I'm able to install Windows in such a short period of time. All right, here's the getting things ready section. On a custom ISO, this usually takes about 30 seconds. So from here, it should restart the system again and boot directly into our desktop. All right. Now we'll have to answer some questions on startup unless you did an unattended file on your custom ISO. I didn't. I just did really the basic MSMG stripped down toolkit. You'll notice no Ethernet is connected. Remember, that's important that you don't have internet on. We'll say limited setup, and we'll label this better than Win 7. Next, no password here. By doing this, we're able to skip a large portion of this. Now you can go ahead, turn all this off if you like. It really doesn't matter, as when we run our debloat script, it's going to tick all this off anyways, and we don't want to keep track of history. Now, normally here you would see a big text that's saying, hey, getting things ready and blah, blah, blah. Since I've actually stripped out Cortana and other things, it's just going to be a black screen. This black screen, usually depending on the speed of computer, lasts between 1 minute and 2 minutes. Okay, and here we are. First thing we do is, one, we probably want to update our drivers, and then two, activate Windows. You need to activate Windows, otherwise you're going to always have a watermark. This isn't about how to pirate Windows. This is how to have a stripped down, clean version of Windows using official resources. So we're going to go start run, type services.msc. The first thing we're going to do is disable Windows Update for now, because it is actually about to get completely removed. But when we connect up that network connection, we want to make sure it doesn't go out and start updating a whole bunch of stuff we don't want. So this one right now is disabled, which is fine. This one is running the medic service. You can't really disable it or anything. Just make sure it's stopped. That's probably the best you can do. And we'll go ahead and plug up our internet, download our drivers, and activate Windows. All right, the cable is plugged back in. We'll say yes. Now it's going to go through. It's going to be dinging and getting all of the drivers installed. Now, another method to do this, hit Device Manager. Just make sure you don't have any caution symbols like this. Now, you can go out, search the web, whatever. I like to use Snappy Driver Tool. It's a great tool. And I usually just come in here and hit Select All and then install any missing drivers. As you see, I got like a 2060 Ethernet driver, just some other stuff. We'll go ahead and hit install and let all this install. It's just an easy way of doing it. And also, you can also stay offline if you have all this downloaded. However, I will say the full offline installer for Snappy drivers, about 50 gigs. All right, all that looks good. Now we can probably see in our device manager a lot less on the drivers. You can see how most of all of those were found. We still have to get our NVIDIA driver installed, but we can always do that at a later date, as that's completely independent. The last thing we need to do before we start modifying anything is just some cleanup here. We'll go ahead, unpin things from the start menu, remove anything else in here that you see. I like to just kind of flip through here. If you miss anything from your custom ISO, just go ahead, uninstall all of these things, and the rest is pretty good. This is actually not that de-bloated of an ISO, but still rather nice. Let's give it a restart and see how fast it restarts here. All right, here's the startup process. Now you'll notice on a stripped down or a custom ISO, the boot sequence is relatively quick. As you see, it's about 4 to 5 seconds on the full boot from BIOS to desktop. And this is actually not even an NVMe drive. This is an old solid state, so you can get this down to just a couple seconds, really. Now, with all this done, we can go ahead and begin the whole AME and stripping more things out to make it even more minimal. Now, from the custom ISO perspective, you'll see on the more details, we're at about 117 processes. Now, before we started, most systems run about 150 to 200 processes fully loaded. So 117 for a starting point's pretty good, but I really think we can get down to Windows 7 levels of about 50 to 60 processes. All right, it is time to start the full purge of most components in Windows 10 with Windows AME method. Now, if you don't want to do this, this breaks Windows Update and does remove quite a few features from Windows, so I don't recommend it for everybody, but we're going to the extreme. Back to our optimization guide, you'll see we have all this. Here's the official one, but I went ahead and forked it and made a completely different GitHub one. There's certain things it did that I didn't particularly like. I didn't like Orbital Explorer, I didn't like OpenShell, I didn't like a lot of the things they did with AME that I thought kind of removed functionality or just made it feel kind of like an old version of Windows. And we're just going to go ahead and just download all these files. And if you want to review each one of these scripts, you can. It's all open source, or you can fork it, make it your own, whatever you want to do with it. In our downloads folder, and I'm just going to extract all just right to our downloads and open it up. You can see the modified batch file. I also removed Office and a lot of other packages that the AME team wanted to install, as I just didn't think it was very necessary for most folks. The thing we need to pay attention to is the SH file. We actually are going to take this file and put it in the root of C. We'll just drop it in here. We'll come back to that when we go into Linux to actually do that. But going back to our downloads folder, we still have our batch file. We'll just right click, run as admin. And then from here, we run the pre-amelioration script and it'll request the Windows. Now, if you have it already plugged in back there, that's fine. But since we use Ventoy, we can't exactly do that. So you got to copy that ISO off and mount it, which is pretty easy to do. Back on the actual Ventoy, we'll grab our Windows. I actually have a full version of Windows here that isn't modified or a custom ISO. We're going to take that one as we just want to grab the .NET files from it. So we'll put that in the downloads folder and paste it. I love how steady and just more consistent copies are once you start using custom stuff like this. All right, we'll right click and hit mount. And you'll see it's the G drive. So we just come into here, hit G, enter. All right, and now that the script is done, it just reboots. And we're gonna go into our boot menu now. For my computer, it's like F11, some are F10 or F12. But from the boot menu, we're gonna select that Ventoy, and now we can actually start to modify things. And we're just gonna select the SanDisk USB drive, and we're gonna boot into our Linux. We're going to pick Linux Mint 20 Cinnamon, and here's a little menu. Just select the first one. Now, I know something's going to happen here, and I did this on purpose. You see how we have artifacting and it's not booting properly? This is because I'm using an NVIDIA driver. Chances are you won't have this happen, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how to bypass this just in case this does happen to you. So I'm going to go ahead and hard reboot and come back into the boot menu and fix our NVIDIA up so we can get on our Linux desktop. All right, come back into Linux Mint Cinnamon. And then instead of here, we're going to press E and then come down to the Linux line. We're going to come to the end of this and we're going to wipe out everything all the way up to quiet and then hit no mode set. And then from here, we just press F10 and it'll add this little option that makes it so we can boot in using an NVIDIA driver or an NVIDIA card. And we are on the desktop. Go into Files, come into the root file right here. You can see our ameliorated script already there. Right click, open in terminal. We just do sudo /am and then just type tab to autocomplete, hit enter, and it'll ask us a bunch of questions. We can just go ahead and hit enter for each one. It'll just choose the default options. Enter, enter, enter. And now it'll just go through and kill each one of these files folders in Windows. All this is really doing is deleting files when looking directly at the script. And while this goes and does its thing, let's take a peek at the script. And we'll just open this with a text editor. Put this over here. You can see kind of what it's doing. It's making a backup of the AME, and then it's basically copying all those old files like Internet Explorer, Windows Media Player, Windows Mail, Windows Defender, those things that we can't delete in Windows that we are deleting here. It's basically copying them all so we could revert this necessarily. Now, I've never actually reverted back from an AME system just because there's so much other stuff that I honestly think it's just better to do a fresh install. But once that's all done, you can see what it's doing. It's doing our RM, RF, Windows Defender, Internet Explorer, Windows Media Player, Windows Mail, and the list goes on and on. Smart Screen, a lot of the junk in Windows. And that's really all this is doing. It's just deleting files. There's no other things happening. A lot of people make it seem like there's a lot more going on in the background with these scripts, but very basic. And the script is completed. We can now reboot, and we'll just do a reboot command, and away back into Windows we go. All right, and we are in. Sometimes it does lose its username and password on initial boot. I like to auto log into a lot of my Windows systems, which I know is a bit cringe because of the security concern there. Obviously, if someone gets physical access, they can just turn on this computer. But if you want to do that, here's a little pro tip to do exactly that. We can go into Registry Editor, come into local machine software, Microsoft, Windows NT, current version, Win login, and really just changing auto admin login to 1, and then default user, password, and just I leave everything blank for this machine as it is an auto login machine. Fun fact, but Windows removed auto login capabilities using like control user passwords too, where you used to be able to just check this to log in here. Now there's some security concerns here which we're going to address as well, but let's run our post-AME script right now. We'll come to downloads, come into here, we'll right click, run as admin, yes, and then we're just going to do the post script now. Now this one differs a little bit from the official AME script just because I'm not really modifying nearly as much as they are when it comes to Explorer functionality and then also what's happening with like the start menu and those types of things. As I kind of like some of the feel of Windows 10, I just don't like the bloat. It'll install old calculator because new calculator uses the Windows Store, which we no longer have on this system. And then it's doing hardening, which it actually has its own little custom one that runs in the background. That'll do it. And press any key to reboot, and we'll go ahead and restart our machine. And here is the AME experience for the most part. Still a couple things left to do. The user, and we'll come into Task Manager. Let's see where we're at. Right now, about 105 processes, which we will explore and get that down even further. But let's fix our user real fast. We're just going to go control user passwords 2. And this is the users on the system. We can actually change this around. We're actually going to go into our users. You can see what accounts we have. We're going to just create a new user. We're going to call it admin. And we'll create a super secret password for it. When we look at admin, it is members of the users. We want to put it in the administrators. Apply. And OK. And then our login user, we want to remove it from the administrators, but we're going to put it in the users group. Hit OK. And what this does is if something gets elevated or it needs to run as admin, this user won't be able to run it, which is good because that's a security thing. If you don't want to do this, by all means, you don't have to, but I highly recommend it. So here is the final AME desktop. I will say there's one more thing I need to tell you about, and that's the harden tools that comes with AME. Honestly, every Windows install should probably run this. And I'm going to go to releases and just download it, even though it's already run. There's one thing I kind of want to show you when you do this, and we'll just run with it. Administrative privileges. And it says, hey, ready to harden your system. I'm going to go show expert settings. There's a couple things I really like. One, PowerShell is a big one. The rest of these, though, disabling Office macros and Adobe Reader, there's a lot of things in here that most viruses use. This removes a lot of vulnerabilities from your Windows that obviously us not getting all the updates on a daily basis, this would probably offset, if not probably eliminate most virus threats. Not to say updates aren't bad. I will just say it's very hard to do updates in AME. Now, if you come over onto my website, Chris Titus, and just do the optimization guide, I do have running updates, and you'd run the servicing stack update, reboot, run your cumulative update, but it can get tricky, and a lot of times the cumulative one will fail, and it just requires a lot of upkeep, and it's technically kind of demanding to update your system on AME. So hardening tools, I think, are very, very important. Now, coming into the final section here, Windows 10 settings. It wouldn't be any kind of guide without me running my toolbox that I've been slowly working on. Other collaborators have actually come in and done things, and we're just going to do some essential tweaks here and just run this. I also kind of wanted to run this at the end because then you can choose your browser. We have Google Chrome, Firefox, Brave, all the ones that you want to do, but I wanted to give that option to you, and that's completed. And you can see all the stuff it's doing in the background. There's still a lot of tweaks I like to do in here. Most of this stuff doesn't even exist anymore. Obviously, like background apps, Cortana, OneDrive, all that doesn't exist. But let's say I want to go into like dark mode. I can go ahead and flip that back to dark mode, or if you like light mode, do that. Visual FX, I'm gonna probably do that as well, just kind of make things a little bit snappier and faster when I'm going through my menus. And then probably Windows search, I like to just completely disable all of it. I think pretty much it gets ripped out in this past one, but I'll just go ahead and click it. And then security, most things here you're probably going to want high, it being an AME based system, but if you skip the AME portion of this video, heck, you get to choose what type of security you want. And update, well, I just went over Windows Update. There is no Windows Update. Now we're still around to probably about 100 processes. Just looking at this, we'll go to performance, and about 107 processes. This is where we can start to cut things down. I think right now it's more performant than a Windows 7 system, especially an up-to-date Windows 7 system that is already rather bloated. But we can take this to an extreme level. As I said, this is an extreme tweak or optimization guide. And what we're going to do is just see what all is happening and we can actually start to disable a lot of these different services. Now, to get the absolute lowest, fastest running one, I would say Windows version 1709 from about 3 years ago is probably the best one to bloat. I've been able to get this process count to about 40 or 50 on a 1709 spin. That was a creator's update, was probably the best version of Windows 10 out there. However, it's not really suitable for today's environment in a lot of ways, just because it's starting to get a little long on the tooth or a little dated. However, I will still say 1709 is by far my favorite because of the less of the bloat. Now, there's a lot of things like connected device platform. You can't stop this stuff a lot of times. And this one allowed me to do it. Yeah. A lot of times it will not allow you to change these. It'll just say parameter incorrect. But there are stuff in here that you don't necessarily need, like meta data usage we could probably disable, and just kind of go through each one of these. And let's see how far down the process count we can do. Diagnostics policy service, we'll go ahead and take it down. Network location awareness, print spooler. We're not going to print anything from this system. We're going to remove the push notification service, touch keyboard, web account manager, program compatibility assistant, Microsoft Store install service, and an orchestrator update service, IP helper. If you use a lot of IPv6, by all means, leave this enabled. And network connection broker, let's see if we can't get rid of it. These are mainly store dependencies. Remote access, I'm also removing. And that's about it for services. Let's go ahead and take a look at Task Manager. And you'll see we're at about 80 processes. Let's go ahead and give it a reboot. All right, no errors or anything on startup, which is good. And here is basically our final product after a reboot on the services management. This is pretty darn clean, pretty darn low, memory usage being just a hair over a gig, which is really good for Windows. Obviously, if you have a really old PC, this is kind of the install I'd probably prefer to do. I wanted to make this video mainly just to tell you, it's okay, we can change pretty much whatever we want to in Windows, and there's a lot more stuff we could actually rip out. We didn't even touch on Task Scheduler and some other things, as this video is getting a little long in the tooth. But I want to leave you with this. Windows is getting worse as time goes on. There's no doubt about that. There's more and more processes happening, and it's still needed for a lot of gaming. I've made a lot of Linux videos on this channel, and the reason being is I would like there to be a viable alternative for everything I want to do. Right now, for 100% gaming, you pretty much are using Windows, and I would like to change that. I would love to do that. That's why I always talk about Linux and those types of issues. I hope this optimization guide gets you to where you want to be, but be very cautious of doing everything in this video, as not having updates, not properly doing the hardening tools will make you very vulnerable. And for those few people that are still on Windows 7, you're fools. Don't ever use Windows 7. You could be hacked by a script kiddie at this point. They're not even releasing any kind of updates for it, and the security is abysmal. So do not use Windows 7 in 2021. You've been warned. Don't come crying to me when you get your ransomware. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.